Hi, everyone, and welcome to Work Cookie. Today, we will be discussing how to fix your career blind spots in IO psychology. My name is Heather Morton, and I'm going to start out by discussing my own career blind spots. And that was when I first got into IO psychology. I had no idea how to even start by transferring my own skills. And well, for one, I did not, like many others, start out as an IO psychologist. Surprise. I started out in healthcare. And when I first even heard about IO psychology, like many others, I didn't even know what it was. So, getting into this field, learning how to IOify my resume, I just didn't even know what to do and where to begin. And so I underestimated what even transferable skills were. And then it became a snowball effect of I misunderstood my market value. I didn't even know that I could IOify my resume. And this led to other blind spots. And so I have a list of blind spots, but I think it's really important that when we are, especially in this field, there are so many things that when it comes to career clarity, I think finding our niche, understanding that networking is super important,
Yeah.
and even just reaching out to others and just asking for clarity can make a really big difference in where we are and where we're going. And so, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tim.
Well, thank you. I'm going to lower
Yeah.
my hand here for a second. So I was so glad when we saw this because I am sort of in that spot you were just discussing. Uh, just shy of 2 years away from the confirmation of my degree, looking at my skill sets and my market niche. And again, I've dedicated the remainder of my life to improving the public safety workplace. And so with that sort of that mantra, kind of my Simon Sinek why, that's how I've been viewing things. So what helped me with the blind spots was doing a CV review. And
Ooh.
again, Heather, to your point, going over what we've done in our previous career, what we've done in the past, that has all impacted how we are here and now. And
Yeah,
so going over a CV review was a great way. There are things I'd forgotten about that was all part of my lifetime experience that led up
absolutely.
to getting the IO psychology degree. So
That is
doing a
so true.
CV review was helping my blind spots.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. And if we don't write these things down, it's so easy to forget about it. I was just looking at the other day, I always keep my previous resumes, even from like 2013, and just seeing things that I've accomplished from previous jobs. I'm like, "Oh, I forgot I've done that. That's neat." And rightly, it's you could just don't remember things from again like 12 years ago because again, our minds tend to forget things. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I think I brought up blind spots. You simply don't know what you don't know. And so that creates all these fun, stumbling, bumbling moments, particularly for those that are in career transition. I think one of the biggest ones that I have is assuming that everybody knows what I know, kind of that bird of knowledge. And once you know it, how can you not see this, this great thing? And you realize, oh, I went and got special training. I read the right books and studied the right courses, and I can see things for what they are. And the ability to be able to explain that to people can be a superpower. And you may think it's great that I want to focus on employee engagement through training. We'll train them up, and they'll want to stay for that reason. Well, that's great in theory, but at the same time, it may not be what an organization really wants. So you have to find not only the crosswalk of, okay, how did I get here to get this degree to be in this niche, how do I make this niche of IO psychology important enough that somebody will pay me handsomely to, do that for them, or that they'll get as excited about the topic du jour as you do.
That is so true. Well, and especially with IO psychology, when it's such a poorly branded field, and if if people don't know what it is and you're trying to explain it to them and their eyes just kind of glaze over, a lot of times you're having to just explain it as what you can do for them. What is the results? What is it that you can do to help them? I totally get that because they're not going to care about, I have this master's degree or I have this PhD. That doesn't matter to them. And so it matters to you. I validate that. But in the reality of it, they just care about what you bring to the table. Lee, over to you.
This is such an interesting thing, because anybody who's kind of heard any part of my sordid tale that got me to here, um, you know, I finished my master's 30 years ago, and back then IO was pronounced HR, and so you know we've come a long way, believe it or not. For those of you who are more recent to this field, we've come a long way. I mean, the fact that you can actually find a job with IO listed as a desired degree, light years. Soak it up, people. And it took me like legit 25 years after graduation to meet an IO in the wild. Like legitimately. I walked across the stage, they handed me a piece of paper and they wished me luck. And 25 years later, I met someone who actually admitted having an IO degree. Now, did I meet someone else? Possibly. I just didn't know, because it's not like we have a secret handshake or a decoder ring or something, that we don't do secret signs like we're Masons or something, But so without talking about it, we don't recognize each other, And so I have an entire career between then and now that, when I joined CBOC, I was talking to Jeremy and I was like grousing. I spent all this time in this managed degree, rah, 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 because I was retiring from the Navy, moving into the civilian world, going through that transition. And Jeremy just like metaphorically smacked me upside the head as he was looking through my stuff and was like, dude, there is IO all through this. And he started pointing out points in my journey where I had used IO, just looking at my LinkedIn. I used it here and used it here. And I'm like, it was like, head explosion. Wow, I didn't waste my time. Holy cow, I've been using this stuff. And then joining, these sessions and, from the beginning, like the very first time I sat in on this, I didn't even realize it was a podcast, which is a whole other thing. But so I sit in here and I'm like, I'm just going to listen. And I ended up getting pulled into the very first conversation because I actually had something I could share because I've seen it. I've done it. And I've been using IO concepts for 30 years, even if I didn't realize at the time or call it that, because I wasn't thinking through that lens. I wasn't looking through that lens. I was like, oh, I have an employee with a problem. I know how to fix that. Oh, you want to know what to do with your career? Let's have a chat, and all these things, all this time I spent in the Navy, I did, I found out what I was doing was coaching. Who knew? And so a lot of times we are using these skills. Even people who aren't classically trained in IO are using these skills that are very much applicable. We just don't necessarily know the words to use. And a bonus for me is having had this entire career, quote unquote, outside IO, is that I've learned to speak regular people. And so what I had to do since I've come back in is relearning to speak IO. And so I naturally have that translation because you get all these people that come out of these school and they're brilliant. They've got all this great knowledge and then they start talking and they lose people immediately. I got no idea. I mean, I recognize those words, but not in that order, and so it's a challenge because you have to be able to translate that brilliance you have in your head into something that a regular person will understand. Not that the regular people aren't smart, because many of them are just as brilliant in other fields. And so a lot of it is the words. And that's one thing I like to tell people: if you're going to use like ChatGPT or something with your resume, great. Take all your crap and feed it in there and say, give me new words. A little hint, kids: never use a resume spit out by AI. Never. Don't do it. But let it give you words for stuff that you've already done. I mean, I don't care if you were a cashier at McDonald's. You have used IO. You just need the words to describe it. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now because other people have things to say.
No, that's so true. And I like how you say to use like regular language, because once you start using like the two big words or like the highly academic, you do lose people because they're going to zone out. They're not going to pay attention, and you're just going to lose them. They're not going to pay attention to you. And then that's sad, because we do need to kind of bridge that gap so that they can understand you. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, we always joke about the IO branding problem. You know, when you have to take an inhale before you spell out what an acronym means, that's a problem. Um, and so it's just there's no short acronyms in our field. And I think one of the things that we can get tied up with if we, circle the wagons too tightly, there's a lot of really smart people who all have master's level education or better, that can start speaking this language. And there are times I've seen it at SIOP in particular, where we have the answers. We should be the ones in the room. Well, yes, and what about the MBA or the lifelong HR person? There's no one road to get to the answers to make the workplace better for people. And I think maybe not a blind spot, but certainly tunnel vision. That I have the answers, I have the study, I know where the evidence is. Let me show it to you. And it's true, and you may have the studies that are more validated, but there's 10 people who have the same anecdotal evidence that you've got to come up against and really try and tell that story and say, okay, that worked for you. Here's why. Or you were really lucky that it didn't go off the rails and go this way. So I think just kind of not assuming you have all the answers. Again, it's hugely, be humble, be smart, be respectful in dealing with people. If we could get down to those basics, a lot of things would probably go better in a hurry. But, I think that there is a lot of collaboration and important things that need to be done. Even within, IO itself, we can't necessarily get the academics and the practitioners at the table at the same time to think the same way. And I think there's a point where we can check the assumptions. I was flabbergasted at one point a couple of years ago. A company like Workday didn't have any direct IO people there. And it was like, what are we doing here? You guys are the big energy in the space for applicant tracking and all that. I believe it has since changed, and people have kind of come to the surface and been more direct with IO experience there. But, we make the assumptions that these tools and these companies are out to do it the right way. And it's not always, what survives isn't always, optimal. What survives is what works. And so I think that even with good intentioned tools and companies, you're going to get people who are going to use it not in the way that it was intended. And so I had an application where I had to take a personality survey as part of, the application process. Now, the people who worked very hard to design that tool had one way to use it in mind, and the hiring manager who's putting it into play, they may have a completely different agenda. And so you start to wonder, I think it was the constructs in the wild. Once they're out of the bag, somebody else can get a hold of them and change them really, really quickly. And so I think that's, when we don't have a common language across business, you could say cashier, you could say currency management specialist, you can dress things up with whatever words you'd like. And so just to try and find that consistency and that common ground is something that is critical for everybody, but especially when you're trying to convey the high level evidence-based principles and, tell somebody, hey, you can't discriminate based on X, Y, or Z. They might go, but I want to, but I don't feel a connection with this person. And that can absolutely be true, but they open themselves up for a variety of mishaps to come down.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Lee, over to you.
Yeah, this actually brings to mind, the class I teach, management psychology, that a lot of my students are not psychology majors. In their undergrad, a lot of them are just figuring out what IO is. But you get into these discussion boards and stuff, and you're like, and things like bias. What is something you can do to reduce bias? And to be able to go and look through their lens. These are students, some of these are one of their first classes or whatever. They don't have a lot of background in IO. They don't have, or any, not a lot in psychology. And so they're getting the concepts that they're reading the textbook and the supplemental stuff. And we're putting a question to them. Okay, tell us about this. Tell us about a performance appraisal. Do you think it was, was a good measure? Tell me why. And you go in and you look at these discussion boards and you're like, huh. And it's interesting because when you look through it to the lens that we're looking through, you're like, okay, I see this. But it's really, really interesting when you give this concept to a layperson, for lack of a better word, and say, okay, here's the concept. What do you think? What is your experience with this? And then you read what their experience is, and they're just like, wow. They have no background. They haven't, they don't know what the research is behind this thing or whatever. And they just like, oh, yeah, I experienced that one time. I'm like, well, cool. Tell me about it. And it is kind of fascinating. And I will tell you, if you walk into, like I said, I've been out of academia a long time. My research, my current research, knowledge, pretty slim. So, but when you walk into a non-academic or scientific type individual, if you start talking about research, you've lost the conversation already. But when you walk in there and you say, hey, look, I've experienced that says that this will work. If we do these things, couch it in experience, couch it in things you've seen, whatever. But when you walk in and say, well, the research says, which we want to do because we've spent all this time and money on this, fancy title. And, so-and-so and so-and-so say, they don't know who that is. You might as well be saying Johnson & Johnson. They don't know. And they don't care. Which is really kind of the key. So when you go in and you say, all right, so I see your problem. Did you know that was a problem? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so here's your problem that, I see, and here's why I see that's a problem. And here are some suggested solutions that you can use to do that, to fix that. I've seen this work. I've seen this happen. I've done this before. This is the same book, just a different chapter. I can help you. I can meet your pain point. And if they go, well, that's cool. Where did you find that out? You can say, well, I'm one of those cool cat IO people. Or, there is research behind this. I don't have to go into the details unless they want to know, but you can say, well, there is research behind what I'm giving you. This is something that has been validated. And they go, oh, well, I feel special now. Cool. So it is a matter of speaking the language that they understand and that they care about, because most of the world are not academics. Most of the world are not scientist practitioners. Most of the world are just regular bubbas who are just trying to get through the day without it all imploding. And when you say, I see you, I understand, and I can help you, and here's how. If they really want to know, they'll ask. And then you can geek out all you want. Otherwise, save your geeking out for this wonderful group of people who have all this amazing knowledge, and, there you go.
I love it. Yes. That's a great choice. All right, but what about other blind spots? What in your career have you also noticed? Lee or Nick, Tim?
So I looked for the raise my hand button. So we'll just all agree I just raised my hand. To the point that Lee has wonderfully made, and he actually has made it in the past as well, and we've all talked about, we have a branding and marketing problem. And part of it is on the fly, draw, compare and contrast. I talk about how we are like sports psychologists. I mean, they may not know what a sports psychologist is, but they realize for that market niche, there is a sports psychologist that helps their favorite athlete, whatever flavor sport you like, to become the next best iteration of themselves. Like we do that for the workplace. And then, of course, have the Adam Grants of the world to define it as we help the workplace suck a little bit less.
I love it. Yes, that's a good one. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I think, when you're, I'm living it right now, trying to find the first goal that, really speaks to the degree in training. There's kind of the blind spot where you went through academia and everybody gave you the case studies, the coursework and all of that. And, there's a hesitancy to say, well, I do have the expertise. I can apply this wherever. And so to take a stand and do a little job crafting in what you're looking for, saying, okay, the primary thing here is recruiting, but I'm going to apply, selection and reduction and bias. And that's where I'm really going to, take the bull by the horns and get in somewhere and, let them know you. I know for me, looking in the training and development space, I've had to kind of shift back and say, okay, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get that out of the gate, if they don't know me from Adam. But is there a high level customer service place where I can put it on Front Street? Say, hey, I want to be in the organization. I want to know what you guys are about, get to know the culture firsthand so that when we do see a position open up that has some of this, development, organizational change, I know the starting point. I know the original language, and just being an internal sort of advocate. I think there's a lot of you have to be a consultant. It has to look a certain way, and it really does not. There is a lot that can be done just by your personal choices. And I know, again, being stuck in a job search, it is very formational. You have to be reflective. You have to get clarity on what you want to do and how you want to do it and who you want to be, and then go find an organization that'll pay you to do it. And you find that all of the things people tell you to do in a job search are things you should be doing continuously as a professional. Don't stop networking just because you got the job. Don't stop sharing information just because you don't need to be seen anymore. I mean, yes, it changes when your full-time job is not looking for a job. And still, I think all the things that get you to that point, you need to be doing those, in the same professional manner that you would be doing the jobs that you're applying for.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Rich, over to you.
So, there's been a lot of blind spots in my career, right? And so I've sought to help to get help, right? And I'm actually rereading an old. I would like to say it's an old chestnut, but it's really they update it literally every year. What color's your parachute? You may have seen, it is like literally the most. What did they say in the book? This edition, it's the most stolen book in the library system, right? Because people they need that kind of guidance, right? But it has a lot of really good resources for you to use, and I've been working with students and college students lately, helping them on their career paths, particularly in business. And one of the first things before we have a conversation, right, before I look at their resume and all that, I do ask them to give me some of the results from their own reflection and some of the assessments that they can take. For instance, at this particular college, they take the Clifton Strengths Finders. So understanding like your top 5 strengths is a great way to lead, right? In terms of where your where your natural inclinations are, and then it could also give you some of the adaptive styles that pertain to that. understanding like Lumina Splash, the Lumina Splash app, which is free, and you can take that. And we've had some people from Lumina in some of the discussions before, where they've shared that particular one. So it's an ocean based assessment. It also has some profiles from Young in there, right, and MBTI. I'm glad Rich Ward isn't on this call because I just said the acronym that's going to make him shudder. But yeah, it blends some of the archetypes into the context of the Big Five ocean, right? And then the other one that I think is super powerful. I mean, if you can work with a practitioner and get the entire standard SDS by Holland, that is a very powerful assessment to know your work preferences. But if you don't want to do that expense, what you can do is go to ONET and use the My Next Move, which they just like updated this year. It's actually they for like it's no longer looks like something out of the 90s, which is great. They've updated the UX on it, but it's a great way to get the Holland codes, the RIASEC output to say whether you are realistic, investigative, artistic, enterprising. I don't remember that. Is it compliance? Conventional, right? I couldn't remember that. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yes, but that's and so it's those three, getting to know yourself, like that's probably the best way to get through those blind spots. I personally did that before going into IO. So I went 2019. I went through. I actually found a career counselor, a licensed career counselor, not just a career coach, who put me through some of the assessments. And then, we did a significant amount of discussion on, what are my motivations and what does the market need? There's the other part, right? What's the market going to bear? So we could want to do some certain thing, but if the market doesn't bear that, how can we adapt to the market needs, right? So we have to think of ourselves as product development people who are developing this product right here, that can do, to provide value within a certain organization, right? So I don't know if that helped at all, but that's my 2 cents.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Emmy, over to you.
Hello. Yes, no, Rich, it was perfect. And you just made the perfect segue into what I was going to say. So thank you. Which the market needs piece, right? What does the market need? The other thing that was really coming to my mind, what problem am I solving with my solution, or what my expertise is, or what I bring to the table? And I think that's really where it meets that market need. When we talk about blind spots, a blind spot that I am really discovering even personally is business acumen. So we understand the people and the inner workings of the people within the business, but perhaps not always the business itself. Things like pricing strategies, especially if you are a solopreneur or you're working to build your own consulting business, or looking for marketing skills, right? To know how to market what problem you're solving and what solution you're bringing to the table. I think there is a program I've heard of recently that was a student going through an IO and MBA dual program. And I think that is brilliant, because it is, in my experience from the IO side, something that is significantly lacking in a lot of programs. Definitely was lacking in the program that I went through for IO. But even not just the business tangible things like pricing, how do you sell your service, even things like influence as an individual. So we may know the data behind what's best to influence, but have we had practice with being influencers in a workplace and actually becoming leaders in a workplace, and how do we start building some of these business specific muscles in our toolkit? Data storytelling is one that comes to mind. One of the things I initially thought, and I've even heard from people, is the data speaks for itself. That's not true for a lot of people. And you have to know how the data you're presenting actually speaks to a story. I lead data teams right now, and oftentimes that's what they share is a need to understand the business use case of how my solution that I'm developing, whether it's a dashboard or a report that's going to be emailed to a business leader every week, how is this solving a problem for them? What is the problem? And what's the ROI on it? And how do I understand that tangibly? So it's not an IO specific problem, but when you're niched in your specific role without understanding those business acumen elements, I think that can be a really grave blind spot, but particularly for IOs, because we do work within the context of understanding people in business, right? Or in organizations. And then being able to speak that language, it was heard earlier, but I think from those tangible business perspectives is really helpful. It's for-profit, nonprofit, I think is both unique areas too. Nonprofit's a whole different animal when it comes to understanding the business, bidding, grants, where does the funding come from, federal, state, right? So to me, that's a blind spot that you can partner with others, whatever organization you're in, your network, people that are working on the business side. Those make really beautiful and brilliant partnerships of learning because you have something to offer them in terms of the people side of it and helping the effectiveness, productivity, all of those things. And they can offer in exchange through collaborative partnerships, mentorship, whatever it is, being able to reveal and close each other's blind spots. So I really recommend that, partnering with people who do speak the other language and having some translation services between you as the partnership.
Absolutely, Dr. Emmy. And I think also leaning into your skills, because when you mentioned like contracts, I remember in my postdoc fellowship having those RFPs. I hated writing those and finding someone who could do those for me. And I could be like the spokesperson who went out and connected with others and like I could be the voice and do the networking. And I was really good at like creating training and development and administering and scoring personality assessments and other assessments. Like I leaned into the skills that I was really good at. And you know what it wasn't? RFPs. Not those. So we found someone who could do those. And so finding things that are really, really good for people who could fill those spots. Because it's not, life is really, it is too short to do things that you don't enjoy. Rich, over to you.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Abby, for bringing that up because there's actually a really good book. It's not a substitute for getting some education from. CBOC offers some just some resources for people, and then there are other places where you can get like LinkedIn Learning and the like to learn some of that business acumen. But the book that comes to mind is The Personal MBA by Kaufman. And one of the things that he talks about is like there's 12 forms of value, and really talks about the various functions of business in a very short book. Lots of value. I strongly recommend that. It made a huge difference in my career. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was to help with some of the blind spots and identify what you can. Let me put it this way: having social support it's an enormous benefit. So that can come in the form of having a coach, or it can come in the form of having a counselor like I had, but. You can also, and you can lean into your school as well, right? I mean, there's typically at any of the colleges, or even if you are in a training center, right? There's usually some kind of career resource that's there. but there's a book called Never Search Alone, that by Phil Terry, I think is the name. And there are these job search councils. Are tons of them everywhere. They're free to join. And the idea is that it's a bunch of people who are searching and who are, trying to figure out their careers, right? And they can be at various different levels. And some people who are just want to give back to the community, come back to them, right? So, those job search councils, they actually have a whole free resource where you can find one in your local area, and that's in your niche, right? So, Never Search Alone and the Personal MBA, two resources I strongly recommend too.
Awesome. I also put those in the little comments box for those that are here in the chat. Awesome. Over to you, Lee.
Yeah, that brings up a really good, a good point. Back several years ago, I unexpectedly ended up unemployed. I had no plan, no anything, because I wasn't expecting to be unemployed. And I didn't have the support structure in place. Yes, I had my family, whatever else. There are plenty of people who commiserate with you. Helpful to a small degree, but overall, not so much. Trying to go it alone is horrible, soul crushing. Job hunting sucks. I know there are some people that are like, oh, I love it. I think it's a challenge. No, those people are sick. So seek help. But for the rest of us, it is not a fun experience, but don't do it by yourself. Now, does that mean that, you go out and pay head? No. I mean, it means get a support structure. Get people who understand, not necessarily other job hunters, though don't not talk to the job hunters, but that's like guys at the bar talking about, trying to help each other out of alcoholism. You've got to get people in your circle who are doing the thing. You've got to get people who are who have jobs, who have made it to the other side, who have been where you are but are not now. Because you want that understanding, you want the level of understanding, but you don't want, when somebody's sitting in the hole with you, neither one of you are going to see, going to see the way out. So you really need that person on the edge of the hole to stick a hand out and go, hey, let me help you out of there. Now, does this mean somebody's going to save you? No. Does this mean somebody's going to give you a job? Absolutely not. But you have to have these resources. You have to have the support network. You have to, this is a time to seek out mentors. This is a time to network. This is the time to step out of your comfort zone and do some informational interviews to find out about some of these things. And talking about blind spots, you want to know some blind spots, talk to people who are doing things that you are interested in. And even do a mock interview with them. Have them ask you questions and see what you can and cannot answer. That will show you blind spots. And it's better to do it then than when you're sitting in front of a hiring manager. So have someone do that. Have someone go through your resume and ask you questions. How easy is it for you to answer? How comfortable is that? How quickly do those stories come to mind? When you have great stories about these things, write them down. I have a very situational memory. You ask me right now to give you a story, probably not going to happen. But you give me a cue. Most of the stuff that I say in this room is because somebody in this room said something that cues a memory for me. And so for me to remember that after we get off of here, I got to write it down. I got to at least write down a cue. I think it was Dr. Heather earlier was talking about not remembering, what did I do all these years ago? Yeah, I don't know. Write those things down. Just a quick aside, if you're in a job and you have performance appraisals, which most of us do, what did you do a year ago? I don't know. Write it down. Get you a notebook. Use OneNote, Evernote. Start a Word document or a Google Doc or something, and just jot yourself notes, especially wins. Write those things down. So that a year from now, when your boss goes, well, how did you do this year? You go, have I got a story for you? Write those things down. When I was in the Navy, we all had these little green government issued notebooks. We carried them in our pocket. Called it your brain. When you had juniors, you get your brains out. Everybody get their notebook out and write stuff down. And then when you go to do that, you look back through there and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. These things will help you because I don't know, maybe you guys with the photographic memories can just do this, but most of us need mnemonic aids. We need something because we can't think of everything. That's why we have a group. That's why we have a tribe. That's why we, I don't know it, but we do. That's what we said in the Navy. The chief knows. Well, the individual chief may not, but the chief's mess does. I can get you the answer. I may not know it off the top of my head, but I know somebody who does. I can call Tim. Hey, dude, what you got? And Tim goes, man, I got this. That's what you need. Form that group and be that resource for others. It's not a one-way street. So there you go.
Yes. No, okay. So you brought up something about writing your stuff down, and this is gonna sound weird, but this is what I've done for a while, and it works for me. It may not work for everybody, but I used to spend a lot of time in the car because I lived in Atlanta and I always traveled to Greenville, South Carolina. But now since I've moved back to Greenville, I'm not in the car a lot, but I still travel about an hour a day to my parents' house I'm my sister's caretaker. Anyway, getting off that conversation, when I'm in the car and in South Carolina, we have you cannot have your phone in your hand, but if I have thoughts in my brain that I need to get out, I have a recorder app on my phone. I'll go to the app and I will talk to myself, record all my thoughts, and then I send that recording to me once I'm at my parents' house and it goes to my MacBook. Then I take it from there and put it onto otter.ai, which is a website, and it transcribes it for me, which gets me a whole transcript. Then it gives me a nice little summary, a breakdown of all the key points. Then from there, I can put that into Notebook LM and I can make it into I can make it into like an image. I can make it into a mind map. I can make it into a blog. I can make it into whatever I want because it's a closed AI system. It's not open. It doesn't use it's not Chat GPT where we talked about this last week on the podcast where Chat GPT is like an open LLM, large language model. It's a closed one. So my data is protected. And so super nice. And it doesn't get used as training data. So all my stuff is protected. So it's super neat. But to be fair, I'm kind of weird with AI too. So anything that I do post is all in my own words. So I don't just take it as is. I do revise it all anyway. But it is really neat to see all my stuff there. But it is really great to get all my stuff out and I'm not having to keep a notebook. I do have a notebook. Um, it is here too. So when I'm not in the car, I do have all my notes written down too. But that is my alternative if I'm in the car and I need to get all my thoughts out. So
Yeah,
that is helpful.
that's a great point, and I personally have done that, and I thought it was pretty poignant. If you've ever read Matthew McConaughey's, I think it's called Green Lights, and it's written based on all of his. He's a prolific journaler, but he talks about a time in his life where he bought an old van, and he actually had a microphone. He had a boom mic. He had hooked up next to the driver's seat, and he would just talk as he drove, and then transcribe that stuff later. And
That's awesome.
and we don't necessarily have to do that because we have Bluetooth with a hands-free option in a lot of newer cars that you can talk. Or if you have a dash cam, it's recording all the things that you say, so which can be kind of entertaining in traffic. But those are great options to do, Heather. And I have a friend of mine that has he's got a shower notebook.
Oh,
There's the Weatherproof makes waterproof notebooks. with
Okay.
pens that will write on them. And he legit has a notebook and a pen in his shower, and he gets thoughts and he writes them down.
You know what?
So you don't have an excuse. There are plenty of things out there. There are transcription things. Talk to text. You can do that.
They have bracelets too.
Oh yeah. Of course, depending on your accent, that can be very entertaining to read what it writes. But anyway, but yeah, great stuff, Heather. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I think that speaks a whole lot to something that, with all the new fancy toys we have, we forget about the process. You can hand somebody the answer and they might remember it for a day, but if they had to go through and do the research, or, everybody's favorite, phrase in math class was show your work. Once you have some of those mechanics, once you can see the process, it sticks with you a little bit more. And I think that, as things get faster and faster and faster, the processes may change. It's not having the answer, it's knowing where to go look for the answer, to Lee's point earlier as well. If I am learning enough to say, okay, I know where to go to find these things, then that becomes a process instead of just, trying to pluck it out of internal storage. The other thing that I think far too often happens is we make assumptions about how business should run. I just recently started a book, and basically it said businesses are remarkably stable in that they want to make money, no matter what the product, no matter what the goal. They don't have money, they don't have viability. And so you can't get mad at an organization or a company for doing that. We want to ascribe higher goals, and work has meaning for a lot of people. I'm not trying to take away from that. And also, the process isn't designed to be fair. It's built to be efficient when they're trying to select somebody to come into the organization. I mean, I got one while we were on the call, an automatic rejection for an application that I put on. It's deeply personal for me, but it's not personal for them at all. So there's that mismatch there that creates a lot of blind spots. And if you listen to enough of those rejections, and if your strategy is to put as much out there and hope, that's great. Just know that there's going to be a lot of things that come back automatically. Simply, it doesn't match the effort that you put in. I think that's what everybody wants, is kind of that reciprocal. Well, I took the time to customize the resume, and you took 30 seconds to fire off a generic email. So that's where the imbalance comes. But it's not designed to be fair. And, we do as much as we can to make it more fair. But it's really not. And it's hard to kind of swallow that. At the same point, it can kind of bolster that sort of thing. We see everything that we are doing, in a job search and developing a career. And when we don't have answers in silence, we will make up our own story. So if you're getting ghosted from the application that you put in, you're going to say, well, I'm not good enough, or they're blind, they can't see it. Whatever story you tell yourself in there, your performance review. Oh, well, my boss just doesn't appreciate me because they didn't notice the 10,000 things I did to, boost team spirit or whatever it was. But you've got to have it in your back pocket to be able to brag about it and to tell somebody, hey, I did this part of my job and I was really proud of that. You can't just assume that anybody's going to see the effort that you're putting in, because what's going on between your ears, again, deeply personal to you. But, everybody else sees the duck on the water. Like, it's smooth out there. Things are going as they should. They have no idea what your internal thought process is. And again, check the stories you're telling about situations that you're in, because we tend to go worst case more often than not.
That is so true. Dr. Emmy, over to you.
So I wanted to kind of bring together a couple of different notations and concepts that I've heard here on more of the solution. How do you better some of the blind spots, right? How do you create visibility and sight and vision there? And one of the things that Rich mentioned earlier was alumni services, but there are many avenues that have a mentorship component. So I wanted to expand on that a little bit, because it has been personally a really critical part of my career journey, is engaging with mentors. They've really highlighted a lot of blind spots that I had. They brought to life things that I didn't even know were a blind spot. One of the beautiful things about history repeating itself is that someone's been in your shoes at some point in time. And there are really amazing programs out there that are not even costly, or maybe you have a membership somewhere, or you are affiliated with organizations that have mentorship, perhaps that's industry specific, or maybe something else like, hey, help me with the tech side. I'm older in the workforce and I need to learn this new tech, and I'll help you with the business side. There's a lot of different kinds of partnerships out there like that. And I will say from the personal experience and also from hearing of other mentees and even mentors, those partnerships and those dynamics really help reveal each other's blind spots in their career, whether you are well tenured in your organization or new entering the field. There's a whole wide array of resources out there. Alumni services is where I've really sought mine out more recently, but I've done it through my organizations who have had those sort of programs. There was one formerly called Bridge, which was bridging the long tenured folks in the organization with the new folks and providing some shared perspective there. But if you are someone who is long tenured and has considered mentorship, here's your official invitation to consider actually being a mentor for folks, because there are benefits, the same that we've talked about with people in their jobs, whether it's developing expertise, sharpening emotional intelligence, providing some sense of legacy as you may be on the tail end of your career, or even getting more exposure to whoever the network of your mentee is, right? There are many benefits for both people out there. So if you're in a position to mentor, I highly advocate being that available mentor for others who are walking now in the shoes that you have been in before. If you're someone who needs some exposure to and some greater visibility and clearing of the fog of your blind spots, mentorship is a great option. But I actually more want to say that those who are available and feel like they have some expertise, experience, and things they can bring to the table for someone who's new in a career coming out of university, those are really great partnerships for both people. So make that consideration. It clears blind spots no matter where you are in your career, and really provide some tangible benefit for both parties.
That's really good, Dr. Emmy. Thank you for sharing. As we begin to wrap up this episode, are there any final things that anyone wants to share about blind spots? Yes, Dr. Tim, I know you have your
Well,
research. Did you want to share that?
well, I was going to put that off to the side because Dr. Ebby's point was resonated with me
Yeah.
because I'm big into mentorship. And I know we have at CBOC a lot of students. So
Yeah.
for those of us that are more recent graduates, I found myself through other research projects helping to not so much mentor, but kind of give advice as to some of the potholes that I hit in my process and help them to avoid. Because again, so I'll make sure we acknowledge our students out there as well. So thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Emmy, for that point.
I love that. And Lee in the comments mentioned our Pathfinder program and our IO Career Accelerator course. So at CBOC, we do have our IO Pathfinders, which is where our students and our new IO psychologists can join, and you can connect with seasoned IOs who can really just partner with you as you are on this IO journey and kind of help you gain that clarity and direction in your career. I know that navigating the IO career field can be kind of hectic, especially because there are so many niches out there. And if you don't know what your interests are, where your strengths lie, what your values are, it can be a little overwhelming or a lot, just where you are. And especially if you are a new grad or you're almost graduating, or if you've just started your program, the Pathfinder membership can be a really great avenue to explore. And then the job course can be really, really awesome. And Rich did mention he was a Pathfinder, now turned pro, and the ability to meet with people and learn from the resources has had a tremendous value. And then our job course. So if you go to cboc.com/job, /job, my apologies, you can join our IO Psychology career course. And so it is a self-paced course, but you can join our one-on-one weekly meetings with Linda Ann, and she is phenomenal. She will work with you in a group setting or one-on-one, providing you personalized support. And you also get to network with members who join on. In the course, you get to view IO psychology case studies. We have they're called CAEs. They are career acceleration activities, which also help you build your own portfolio, which can be incredibly helpful, especially if you are looking into a job. Because let's be honest, a lot of companies are looking for a portfolio. You have that mentorship. And then you have a support group. We have different audio insights, infographics, and then there are 15 different modules to explore. But wait, there's more, because if you ever watch infomercials, yes, Lee. If you are not wanting to do a course, we also have a workbook with just the career acceleration activities on Amazon. And we'll link all of these in the podcast description. And it's a 95-page workbook with all of those activities, which can be extremely helpful in helping you navigate your career path and finding a better alignment, exploring your values, and gaining that sense of direction in your career. And on that note, that leads us into next week's podcast, which is going to be From Career Confusion to Direction. So I hope you all join us next week, December 18th, which is the day before my birthday, for our CBOC podcast. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will count us down in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.